We'll call the meeting to order for the New Ulm Economic Development Authority for December 13th, 2022. First item is roll call. We'll waive. We have a quorum present. Second item is to approve the minutes from the November 8th, 2022 meeting.
I'll move them.
I'll second.
First and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Now, item number 3, EDA Director's Administrative Report.
All right, good morning, Commissioners and President Brum. Just looking through here. I did want to note for you under the EDA report that we were notified last week that we did not receive the Deed Child Care Economic Development Grant that we had applied for in August. So we have moved forward and set a closing date for the property at 1314 Westridge Road for Monday.
Oh.
So
Okay.
we will take ownership of the building.
Mr. Berg, we thought you might be skiing.
Note under the Get It Ready loan program, one application was received and approved in the amount of $40,000. And note under the multifamily rental rehab loan program, informational flyers about that program will be mailed to all New Ulm landlords with their annual rental registration notices in January. No one used any of those funds this year, so I thought we'd do some education to the landlords. There's got to be some rentals out there with rehab needs, so
Yeah, and it may be just getting the
they
word out.
just don't know
yeah.
about it.
Yep.
Mhm.
Well, I'll offer a motion to accept the Economic Development Authority administrative activities for the month of November 2022.
Second.
Second, I just had one quick question for you, Heather. Several months back, we changed those vouchers, the number. Have you seen any impact with that decision we had made so far?
No.
Okay, so there's not been any sort of, I know we were concerned about potentially some of those costs going up or whatever. So far, we've managed. Okay, great. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote then. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried. Item number 4, Public Housing Program. 4.1 would be Housing and Utility Allowance Schedules.
Yeah, this is an annual item. We have to review the utility allowance schedules for the rental assistance programs on an annual basis. So occupants that live in public housing pay 30% of their adjusted income toward their rent and utility costs. So we have to kind of estimate what their utility costs might be, and that's based on tenant usage from the prior year, current utility rates, and weather factors are in the calculation as well. Tenants that live in our family unit rental houses are responsible for all of their utilities, while residents at Broadway House Apartments are only responsible for their electric bill. So we've run that through the calculation, and you can see the changes for Broadway House for one-bedroom apartment. The utility allowance went up $1 from $31 to $32. And in the one-bedroom, and then in the two-bedroom, it's increasing from $45 to $57. And I guess the reason for the jump there is I only have two-bedroom units, and the usage in one of those units was quite high. So apparently we have a tenant that uses a lot of electricity. And so when 50% of my 2 units is high, it can cause quite a jump. So that one went from $45 to $57. Then if you look at the family unit rates, the 2-bedroom went down from $168 to $118. Again, I only have 2 of those units, and the usage was lower. Just could be the tenant mix I have in those units at the time. The 3 bedrooms also went down a little bit from $187 to $184. And then in the 4 bedrooms, it went up a little from $229 to $241. I only have 2 of the 4-bedroom units as well, so any change in usage with the tenant mix, just factors in. So Overall, this shouldn't impact our program in any significant way.
Yeah, initially I was thinking that was a typo on that family unit when it went down that much. I was just like, I wonder if that's a typo there. But hearing what you said, I'll go ahead and offer a motion to adopt the revising housing utility allowance schedules effective for March 1st, 2023.
Second.
First and second, any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? That carries. Item 4.2, Public Housing Assessment System Score.
All right, so the federal government scores all housing authorities on an annual basis. For public housing, it's called the Public Housing Assessment System Score, or FOSS. Our fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022, and we just received our FOSS score for our past fiscal year. Our overall score was 92%, which qualifies us as a high performer. Anything above 90 is a high performer. This was actually good news to me. I was expecting to fall in the standard performer category, so I was very pleased to see we were high performers. The physical inspection of properties post-COVID has been brutal for most housing authorities. We're just really getting dinged on our REACT scores, and so I thought that would have a bigger impact on our overall score, but
Is that because we didn't do a lot of inspections during COVID?
during COVID, we just were not doing our routine inspections of the units. Even when there were repairs, we just were not entering tenant units for quite a significant period of time. So you can imagine there was quite a backlog. And then with our issues of not being able to keep a maintenance technician, that didn't help. And so we just were really struggling to get ahead of that. And then we got our inspection in the middle of that. And so we didn't do as well as we usually do. But anyway, happy to report good news on the score.
We've been high performers in the past then, right?
We always have been. So I'm really happy we were able to
Didn't
stay
lose
there.
it, right?
I'll offer a motion to receive Public Housing Assessment System Score for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022.
Second.
I have a first and second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Item 4.3, EDA claims list for December 2022.
Heather, what were the items that were out of the CFP 2021?
Capital Fund.
Yeah.
The project under Full Service Electric was to replace the range hoods at Broadway House. And then I had a few other items that I used capital funds for. The one for HD Supply, we bought 2 commercial picnic tables for the patio at Broadway House. One is wheelchair accessible, and then the other one's just a regular. They both seat 4 people. And then the one under River Creek Nursery was to replace a tree that had to be removed. It fell over during a storm, and then also to put mulch in all of our landscaping around the building.
Are we tapped out for the 2021 money?
Not even close. That's why I categorized some other things under capital funds, just to try to spend some of that money.
Is there a time limit when it needs to be used?
There is, there
Okay.
always is. So, yeah, I'm fighting the clock. So
Okay.
since those came in kind of higher expense, I threw them under capital funds.
Gotcha.
I'll offer a motion to approve the EDA December 13, 2022 claims list.
Second.
First and second, any additional discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Gets us on to item number 5, Economic Development Authority, 5.1 Small Business Incentive Grant Program. Consider approving proposed changes to the Small Business Incentive Grant Program.
Yeah, so this program's been around for several years now, and As you know, 2022, there was high demand for these funds. And as the year went on, I had a couple thoughts that I've been bouncing around. And I thought I'd bring it up to you this month because I'll be coming to you in January to renew funding for this program for 2023. So I thought if we're going to change it, we should change it now. One of the changes I'm proposing is requiring that a business be open prior to submitting their application. I've got several businesses on the waiting list that still aren't open, that applied like in April, May, and June, and they're still not open. So they're sitting on the waiting list and they're in front of other applicants, but they're not even open. And you know they have to be open 3 months before they can even receive the grant. So I would propose notifying them that we're removing them off the waiting list and that when they open, they can reapply. And then they're more in proper order on the waiting list behind other people.
Are they not open because they don't have the funds, they don't have this 10,000 to get up off the ground?
I know one isn't open because they're still under construction.
Okay.
I think we're supposed to be open in July and they're still not open. I know one's getting close to being open. The landlord she's going into was doing some rehab. And then, yeah, some other ones are construction related as well. And so, it's up to you. We can leave them on the waiting list. But it's just easier for me to manage the waiting list. If I don't have to sit and go, okay, are they open yet? Have they been open 3 months? And it is kind of a misleading waiting list to have businesses on there that aren't even open yet. So really they should be a 2023 application if that's when they're going to open. They shouldn't have applied so far in advance just to get ahead of other people. The other proposal that I would like you to consider is maybe instead of $10,000, we lower the grant amount to spread the money out to more businesses. So, you could lower it as low as $5,000 or split the difference and go $7,500. It's still a lot of money to give a new business. It's not a loan. They don't have to pay it back. It still helps, but by lowering the amount, we're able to spread our dollars across.
Haven't we had one that took less?
No, they've all had 10.
I mean, this is one of my favorite programs with the EDA, because I think it really does move our economy forward in our downtown. The only thought that I had with this particular program is, and I'd be curious to see what the other board members think, is if we would have, for example, hairdressing company programs, or what if we have 15 in town and then 16th one applied, and we're like, ooh, that's a lot. Could we have categories where we have preferred versus, I don't know, I'm just thinking that that maybe if we had some type of categories, we'd have, make sure we're using our money reliably and making sure we're trying to grow our downtown into not all, and I'm not picking on hairdressers, but having a lot of those shops in our community versus other kind of shops. You know what I mean? I think I'd like to.
Would we really want to
I don't know,
kind
I'm
of give
just-
a certain industry, it's a lack of preference, if you will? I mean, if they're still all spending the $10,000 to get up and running, how is that different than a boutique or a gift shop?
The likelihood that they might close. We've had 2 now, right, that have closed?
Since 2019, there's 2 businesses that have closed that received the grant. One was open for 3 years before they closed, and one was open a short time, 6 months.
But looking at a new location.
They're considering reopening at a new location. Their issues were with their
Had
landlord.
pretty good luck. I don't know, maybe it's too early for that, but I don't know. What do other people think?
I don't think that it's necessarily a bad idea, but what I would suggest is that we maybe look at it in terms of somewhat broad categories. Maybe we could have categories like retail, technology, manufacturing, small manufacturing and then allocate so much for grouping or something, I don't know, but that's going to obviously tax you a little bit more in terms of kind of keeping track. The other thing, I don't have a problem necessarily with them applying, but I think in order for them to stay on a list, they would have to open within a certain set period of time, either 60 or 90 days, and then at which time they would get bumped back. I would hate to see somebody that is open, approaches us for a grant, not be able to receive the grant because somebody who is not yet open is in front of the line or in front of the line for them. So that would be my two thoughts. The other part of it with the maximum reimbursable, you have to refresh my memory. They have to come with receipts. Do they have to have receipts totaling $10,000 in order to get $10,000? So could we limit that we would match 75 cents on the dollar of invoices provided to up to a $10,000 maximum or something in order to make them have a little more skin in the game?
Usually we ask the applicants to put in more than $10,000 in case stuff isn't approved or not eligible. So usually we get anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 of receipts.
Okay.
I mean, it's probably not too hard to burn up 10 grand opening up a new
No,
business.
I didn't think so, but it was more of a way to leverage the money out a little bit more too. I don't know if that's a practical way to approach it or not,
I'm
but
okay with lowering that amount. I have no problem with that. Maybe
I'm okay with
there
that.
might be some that don't need that much. So,
I would, instead of a match program, I would rather have a flat fee just to make it easier. Because how many applicants are on the waiting list at this time?
9.
9. And how many, I mean, we have an anticipation of more businesses applying in 2023, I'm assuming. So,
Yeah.
I think it makes sense with the demand to be able to spread that money out more so that we're able to support all of the businesses and not be picking and choosing. So, what do we normally allocate? What is allocated for that?
Typically 50,000 a year, but 2022 at the beginning of the year, because I had a waiting list, we went with 60,000, and then because we received some litigation dollars from a lawsuit, we were able to fund an additional 4. So in 2022, we gave out $100,000 in grants,
and there's still a waiting list.
and I still have 9 on the waiting list.
And
5
of
that are
all,
open.
how many grants have we issued totally since it started in 19?
4, 5, 13, 23.
23 with 2 of them failing.
nice.
It's not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's less than 10%.
When you think about how cool is that? That we have that many small businesses wanting to open in our community.
Well, it does plant some seeds, I hope.
Do we have any programs or any other sources of funding to, even if we did reduce the amount per applicant, to still increase the funding to, I don't know, be able to accommodate for, there's more people applying? You mentioned like the multifamily, do we have programs or places where things aren't getting utilized as much?
Yeah, the difference with this program is that it is a grant. And so once that money's paid out, we don't get it back. The other programs are loans. And so the idea is over time, they will become revolving loans where we won't have to allocate money into them every year because we'll be able to, off the payments we're getting back, it'll fund itself. This program wouldn't do that.
And then
How much do you plan to allocate this year for 2023?
I mean, I'll probably come in with a request of 50,000 because that's been the standard amount, and then it'll be up to
So
that board to,
of the 9 that are on the waiting list, how many of them have actually opened at this
5.
time? 5. So then the 50,000 is already spoken for, essentially.
if we keep it at 10,000.
Yeah.
And then since we don't have to put money into the multifamily coming into next year, you do have a little wiggle room because you don't have to
Sure.
replenish. But,
Yeah, that'll carry
food
over.
for thought.
Mhm.
Well, Well, I would like to be able to see us help more businesses and not, going into the year, kind of having everything spent and then we have to come back and get more money and, we may have to do that and that would be a great problem to have.
Right, right.
But I think we would best serve everyone if the money could go a little further and help out more businesses.
So the rehab, was that 50,000 too we were putting in there annually?
150 for the multifamily.
Multifamily?
Sorry, is it 100?
To get it ready was 120,000, I think, and then the multifamily was 150.
Yeah.
150.
So in
Between
essence,
those
there's
two.
150 technically we could play with.
Until a multifamily housing,
Well, the funds are already in there, so this year's will carry over. That's the whole point of the
Right.
revolving loan is.
So you
only-
won't have to take money out of reserves to refund that program
Get
for
a
the
sudden
upcoming.
rush of multifamily in '23, then that would
Well,
present
you know,
an
those
issue.
flyers are going out.
There you
so-
go, yeah. My thought is this, is that we would certainly put 50 in to cover the 50 that are already open, but that's really just going to get the slate clean for 2022. And then we would maybe start the year borrowing from Peter to pay Paul 50 from the multi-housing, and then maybe reassess it mid-year to see where we're at, see how many of those businesses that haven't opened, maybe have opened with their construction considerations. Those are my thoughts.
do you feel like that would just continue to have us be behind as more
Well,
applications come in?
Part of it's making an assessment, a dual assessment. Number one, on the grant program for the small businesses, and number two, to see where we're at with the multifamily, to see if that's kind of staying status. Since
I
we're
don't see an action item here. You're basically just looking for,
recommendations, yeah.
so I hear support for a lower amount. And then I think we'll just have to go along with what the new board talks about in January, because there will be 3 new board members.
Yeah, let's kick it down the road. I like that idea.
Unless you want to stay. Change your
I
name.
can't.
Change your name and stay.
I'm being paroled once and for all. We're thinking 7,500, then we lower it to? Would that be a valid recommendation? My thought is costs keep going up. And so we want it to be impactful in one sense of the word, but at the same time, I think if people are willing to invest of themselves in it, I think that that's an indicator of success. At least in my other day job, we make people make down payments, and then that helps them to, like we call, skin in the game, and make them more willing to stick with it.
Chris, when this program started, did it start at 5,000?
No, we did.
Actually-
We started at 10,000.
Oh, I'm thinking of the loan,
Yeah.
the small business
Small
loan
business.
started at 5, yeah,
Yep.
okay.
I'm kind of wondering too, like, is the reason we've had such success with this program and because we've given that larger amount too, that they haven't had to come up with, additional funds themselves and they've been able to really fully utilize this.
And it could be helping the success rate because they are getting that,
We haven't conditioned this
Influx.
either, right? We don't make them go see Wendy or come with a business plan or any kind of pro forma financial statements up to now. Would that help in, I don't want to call weeding out, but facilitate that the serious business entities are the ones that are really going to be more likely to succeed, would be ones that we would want to invest in?
I'm just looking.
Number 7.
Yeah, I don't see anything in here that we require them to submit a business plan or with SBDC. But
Would that be a condition we would consider?
I think we'd certainly be talking about it more seriously if we'd lost more loans, and we really only lost one. If you figure one business is open 3 years.
Would that bring value to the business owners to have those conversations and maybe, make sure that they have a plan as things maybe start off very strong, but then, suddenly things don't start going well sometimes, and.
I like the idea of meeting with Wendy.
We're paying
I
for
don't know if
that
Wendy
too.
will
We-
like that, though.
Well-
And it would set them up for a little success, you know. I
Why
don't-
don't you talk with Wendy once and see what her input is?
It's only recommendations today.
Yeah.
And that would be something, personally, I think,
Mhm.
since we offer that service, it's free to the business, and we're putting money in. I think that it would be beneficial
Sure.
for both us and them that we would maybe have a greater, and it's not that we've had, I think 2 businesses with the program we've had is, I don't know if we're lucky or smart, but, you know, it's been successful so far.
Okay.
There, give something for the future board to talk about. Right, Jessica?
That's right.
Moving on.
So let's move on. Good discussion, people. Now, come on. It's that gesture that you give when your screen isn't refreshing.
Who's locking up too?
It's loading. Anyone want to read the next item?
Item number 5.2 is childcare project donations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm still frozen, by the way.
I was having trouble earlier.
Resolution waive the reading accepting the donations from the New Ulm Economic Development Authority Child Care Project for the period of November 2022. $5,000 from Jim Thomas, $100 from New Ulm Dental Clinic, $500 from John and Mary Kluge, $100 from Winford Gordon, $50 from Sharon Keel, $100 from Sarah Wood, $1,000 from Belinda Aiken, $500 from Judy and Bill McLean, $5 from Randy Lyken, $200 from Dolores Talsman, $100 from Rebecca Peterson, $100 from Mike and Gigi Portner, $100 from Bob and Cheryl Boisman, $100 from Carrie and Paul Gleasner, and $20 from Cindy Brunner. Thanks to all of them, a total of $7,975.
Now, Les, you have to tell us what each animal represents their donation.
Oh, okay. Let me
No, I'm
start
just
from number one. The bunny.
Yeah, we have a couple of rabbits and maybe a kitten and a tiger. I don't know. Anyway,
Second.
we have a first and second. Is there any additional discussion?
Yeah, I've noticed that they're not businesses, these are individuals.
That was my thought as well.
Couple businesses, or one anyway.
One, yeah. I expect more business donations to come in with time. These went out in the November utility flyers, and depending on the business, it maybe has to go through some sort of approval process, and depending on when they cut their checks. So I don't think we've seen any yet in December from businesses. More individual and family contributions are coming in, but
Thinking too, as the calendar rolls over to next year, they may have already allocated for fiscal or
True.
calendar 2022 and 23 is a new year. So
Right.
I would suggest soliciting once again, asking businesses, and there's probably a fresh pot of money, hopefully for them willing to donate.
hope so. You know, we've heard from multiple employers that they need childcare for their employees, so this is the time for them to step up and help out, so.
Now, is there any issue? I know early in the discussions, there were some businesses that could not donate to government entities. Have we found a workaround for that?
Not yet.
So that might be another factor indicating,
Yeah, I don't know how to find a workaround for that with the EDA owning the building. We are a government entity, and unless we're going to transfer ownership to another entity, I don't know.
could we
How we would
solicit
work
another
around.
organization to be a fundraiser on our behalf and to have that work or not?
I mean, ultimately, the money's going to the EDA,
Sure.
so I just don't
Okay. So
know
that
that
might
there
be
is a
something that is an issue that's going to be ongoing.
Harry's toddlers.
We're caterpillars, Ellie and I. We didn't get in the report here, but we're
Oh.
caterpillars.
Killer among us.
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, then we'll call for the roll call vote because it is a resolution. Is that correct?
Yes. All right, Commissioner Black,
Yes.
Yes.
Now your turn.
Yes.
Berg is up.
Commissioner Yanni,
Yes.
Commissioner Schultz.
Yes.
Commissioner Becker,
Yes.
President Brum.
Yes, that motion is carried. Item 5.3 is funding request from Newbrook. Well, please do, sir.
Well, Merry Christmas, Commissioners and others. I've been here 8 months, and I believe we've accomplished a lot considering where we were. I think it's fair to state that there was a lot of inactivity over the last 5 to 10 years, and we didn't make much progress. And so it has taken a tremendous amount of effort to dive in and look at where we are, try to figure out where we're going, and work collaboratively yet independently, and complementarily yet independently, so that we can bring value to the city of New Ulm. A couple of highlights that I'd like to bring up on what we've done so far. As I mentioned in prior board meetings, we brought Project Lead the Way to New Ulm. We have trained several cathedral teachers. We have a request in from MVL. And just to dispel any rumors, Project Lead the Way has about 12,800 schools throughout the United States that have adopted it, and only about 3,000 are private schools. And I got that directly from their chairman of the board. So it is a very widely adopted program. There are cities in Brainerd that are using Project Lead the Way. In fact, we're a little behind in STEM engineering and things like that. And if we are to make New Ulm kind of this manufacturing city of excellence, having a STEM education throughout our educational system is important, because that leads into the next step. So the first level of sustainability that we've achieved is we got a $20,000 grant from 3M so that we could provide scholarships and equipment to the teachers in the schools who asked for it. So MBL is on board. I'll be meeting with the independent school district to line up a strategy next year for the public school teachers as well. That dovetails into the next grant that we are writing, and we should receive notification next week. It is from the U.S. Department Chamber of Commerce, their EDA, and it is for what's called a planning grant. And this is an amount of money that lets us really dream big and talk about what do we do with the Project Lead the Way curriculum. How do we get kids to start their own business? And it gets into discussions that you and I have had, and Chris and Shannon have had, about a business accelerator and a business incubator. So it all dovetails together. That grant, and we should hear from Region 9, who has taken the lead on that grant this next week, is about $100,000. So that, again, takes a small step toward our self-sustainability. But whenever you get into larger grants, and after the planning grant, so the planning grant begets a large grant application, 500,000 or $1 million. Those things are very all-consuming, and they take resources. I cannot do that myself, because you have to track in-kind contributions. You have to have partners that have more experience than we do, that have more credibility than we do. And so with this one, I plan to bring in, after the planning grant will identify those partners. I fully anticipate that New Ulm will be one of our partners. And then we can write a certain amount of money in that if we're awarded that grant, it goes back to the city of New Ulm. That's the strategy. And then once we get this larger grant, then of course we've established larger levels of credibility and all that. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, because when you go after highly competitive grants in the $500,000 to $1 million, your success rate is probably 1 in 10, 2 in 10. That's good. But this dovetails into the next topic. This last month, I visited 3 incubators, one in Albert Lea, one in Red Wing, and one in Hutchinson. This last year, Red Wing got a $2 million grant for their business accelerator, but they partnered with a group out of Vermont. They partnered with Deed. They partnered with a whole bunch of people. And so we're not talking about something that's really simplistic here. It's complicated. But also know that Albert Lee, Hutch, Owatonna, Faribault, all these towns have business incubators or accelerators already. We don't. So that means that with prospective businesses, we're fighting those people for prospective employers as well. So yeah, we're behind. And whatever we can do together to make this move, I think we should. I think the other thing that's really needed in this is higher involvement from Brown County. And I'm going to be meeting with Sam Hansen on that as well to get them engaged in this, which dovetails into the next big project, which I've talked to you about, which is the Spark Bus. And so now with 3M being approved for more jobs this last week, we're going to start kicking that in high gear. But I'm going to need partners, the City of New Ulm, Brown County, Deed, DOT, and then you have USDA and the Rural Development, Economic Development Grants, or the Rural Workforce Development Grants. All of these things need to be coordinated just to put in a grant application. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. I'm going to need some administrative help, and that's why one other note about the incubators. Every one of those incubators does not make money. They're break even at best. And so know that going in, that this is something that's not going to generate a lot of cash flow. Okay? Last meeting, Andrea asked for more transparency, and so I would ask that you consider sending a representative to our monthly NewBrick meeting to help increase the transparency. And with transparency, what type of pieces of information do you require or do you need? How do you measure success? What are those data points that you want from us? We'll be glad to provide them. So in November, and you don't need to answer now, but in November, I came to you with a letter, I submitted it, and I asked for assurance of a 3-year runway that allows us to continually invest. And there's ways that we can continue to partner together because we can't do this alone. It's got to be a coordinated effort. But I can't do all of this alone as well. So I ask kindly the board to consider approving $50,000 a year for the next 3 years. $50,000 each year for the next 3 years. Do you have any questions?
Paul, you said you can't do it alone and you need 50,000. Is your board considering that for additional help for you, or is
For
that
me.
just salary reimbursement for you?
No, for me, for an assistant.
An assistant, okay.
Right.
Clerical assistant or professional?
No, one that also has grant management experience as well, because we have a lot of details to track, especially in a lot of these grants, Les, they ask for in-kind contribution, so we have to document all that as well.
And that's my question too. A lot of these projects, my question, and I think this is the transparency piece too, is do you anticipate, because in my experience, and I'm not an expert at grants or anything, but
Sure.
a lot of it, a lot of grants today are on a scoring basis. And the success of you receiving a grant is really down to leveraging your local resources too, where if we put in so many dollars, it's going to up our score and make it more likely that they're going to approve a larger national type competitive grant. Is that similar to what we're talking about here?
I think you can put it on 2 levels, Dan. Yes, first, that is true. But secondly, when you have a new entity, and let's just call NewBrick a new entity because we haven't gone after these grants, we have to gain credibility by association. That's why we let Region 9 take the lead on this grant, because they've had a successful track record. Our strategy would be in the next couple of years to partner with people like the company in Vermont, like the other people out of Minneapolis called, what are they called? Key Enhancements. They got the Lake Itasca Economic Development. They got them a 1.5 million economic development grant. But we can't do that on our own. But the things that can be considered in kind, and this is just hypothetical, if the city would have given New Brick a building, let's say, and we had our office in there, we could use that whole building as an in-kind donation and apply it toward the grant match.
Right. And that's exactly, I think, what I'm thinking of, but it could be in kind in terms of physical assets, but also,
Time.
well, in our commitment financially is
Correct.
another
The
thing.
50 grand could be used as an in-kind match also.
Exactly. And
Right.
those sorts of things I feel are critical to those grants because those large entities nationwide are looking toward the level of commitment locally. Isn't
Correct.
that an important aspect of being successful on most every grant application?
Not only that, but letters of support from the community. So when we do this next round of EDA, I had to get a letter from Windings, a letter from 3M, a letter from the college. All of these things add up into what's called the grant application package.
Okay, so I think this is my thought. Some of these things, and I'm assuming you guys, being New Brick, you have a seat at the table with the New Ulm Partnership, and all of this stuff has been discussed at the partnership, and everybody's on board with your game plan.
You know, Dan,
I guess that was a question,
I think
sorry.
discussing it over a noon meal, I mean, because Andrea's involved with Region 9 and she knows the complexity of these grants. It's not something that's, we're going to do this. There's so many layers to things, and it almost takes an education session, which I had to do to my own board, about how our strategy is going forward. So we will certainly keep them involved, but the complexity of these grants and the management of these grants is complicated.
Right, well, and I think it comes down to, we need a high buy-in and local level of engagement in order for any of this to succeed.
Correct.
So we need a lot of stakeholders to get on board. And if we're not there yet, we need to get there.
I totally agree.
Okay. But so that being said, some of the things I'm looking for, and again, this is going to be for the future board here, is do you have any level of anticipation yet of what involvement the EDA may need directly to, and I know today you're here for 50,000, but
Right.
I could easily see us looking for additional funds to help put in funding for local participation for some of these things as they go forward. Is
Yeah,
that
we'll have
correct?
a meeting with Chris and Heather tomorrow
Perfect.
or this afternoon.
Okay,
About, this afternoon? Yeah, about a business incubator.
Morning.
11
Okay.
o'clock, thank you.
so, I mean, all of these
Yes.
things, I just want to get everybody involved,
Yeah.
focused in. Our role is going to be our local participation, number one, and that's going to come after we have all of this stuff that we're focused on as being everybody buying into it and saying, yes, this is exactly what we're looking for, this is exactly what we need, this is our step forward. The project Lead the Way, I mean, I was really impressed how quickly we went from, hey, this is an idea, to it's already in some of our schools. Now, ongoing, for instance, are we going to need, the EDA going to need, because you got a $20,000 grant from 3M.
Right.
Ongoing, is there going to be funding needs for that program to continue to succeed?
Yes, and I feel that 3M is positioned to support that as well as others.
Okay, so,
And so we're going to take the lead on securing other grant funding to
Okay.
keep the scholarships and trainings going.
okay,
I can tell you anecdotally that MBL is in a capital raise right now for expanding their school. And after teacher training up at MLC, the third most course of study chosen by MBL students that graduate are engineering. And so this Project Lead the Way thing has helped them raise money as well. And so they've got, 14, 15 kids going into the CTE Center also which was another big donation by our group as well.
That was another question I had, is how those mesh, Project Lead the Way and our CTE Center, because obviously we've been a big supporter of that as well.
Right.
And I'm assuming it just naturally, one leads to the other, isn't that right?
Yeah, and I think there's even a third thing. I can probably disclose with a great deal of certainty that my office will be down in the CTE Center.
Okay.
And maybe I can provide some mentoring to kids who have an idea about starting a business and ask questions and just kind of push them and guide them a little bit.
Is it a corner office with windows?
I don't know.
Oh,
Is it,
okay.
Shannon? No? Is it next to the welders? Great. Perfect. I get fumes in my office.
No napping in your
No
office,
napping,
dude.
that's
Okay,
right.
Okay.
No, I think the future's bright because I don't think we've done a lot together. The other thing towards sustainability is that Project Spark, which is the umbrella of our incubator, we received 501c3 tax deductible status this last month.
Okay, good. Well, that was one of the questions I had is, can we funnel money for the daycare through your nonprofit and have it come back to EDA? But maybe we
For a
can't.
price, I suppose, huh, Shannon?
For a price?
Yeah. No, but the point is that now we can take tax deductible donations
Sure.
and the reason we got, it was only 90 days for the approval. And usually that's a year. And the reason, I believe, is that we also said our areas of coverage would reach beyond New Ulm. And all of the area outside of New Ulm to the west are federally declared economically compromised. And so that helped us in our scoring and in our consideration to get such a quick turnaround.
So is our board request correct when it states that the funding request of $50,000 per year would cover a portion of the 23, 24, and 25 salary and benefits for Newbrick's executive director? I hear that would not be correct.
That would be for the, well, go ahead,
Well,
Shannon.
that's what it says in the request letter.
Right.
So you want to clarify, Shannon?
Come on up.
Yeah,
Shannon.
come on up. Come on down.
Come on down.
Thanks, Shannon.
So the 50,000 that you gave us last year, we used for his salary.
Right.
And to be clear, we spent well more than that. So we do have skin in the game as well, especially when you look at everything we had to do to get up and running. Just our website, our advertising, our 501c3 status cost us quite a bit of money
Branding.
to do that. So that 50,000 does go towards his salary. We're going to have to come up with more money yet to pay for our part-time assistant, and that's only 15 to 20 hours.
No, I'm going to have to come up with more money for
And, so the 501c3 status, we're super excited about because that's a way. And when you talk about the daycare, I think we should think about that. I mean, we do have to be careful about how we're taking in the funds. Since we also are a 501c6, we have to make sure our funds are kept tracked separately, but doesn't mean we couldn't purchase things that you might need. It's a thing to think about.
Well, and I think that that's the key for all of this. This goes back to when the partnership first was sprung up after the strategic planning. Was the key words was collaboration.
Right.
And I think we've made progress. I think there's a ways to go. I harken back to Andrea's words about the transparency, and I think that our key to success is fostering that on all levels from all entities that have a stakehold in everything economic development, and so that's where I'd like to see things go, and I think I commend everybody. I think we've made some progress. I don't think anyone's going to say the job is done yet, but so.
Yeah, and I think, just other things we're adding value. We've been spending a lot of time talking to Jeff down at the CTE Center, and I think us officing down there, he says they have students graduating there now who are ready to go out, right? They've got their welding certificate, and they've had kids that have said, I want to start my own business right away. Having us be right there, I think could be a good financial resource. You talk about your grants, that might be something we could help with too. I mean, those are strengths that Newbrick should bring to the community, a way to stay private and help with some financial consulting. So I think we're making a lot of good strides. We're having a lot of good conversations. We just need a little bit of help yet to keep
Well,
going.
and I know we've had conversations, and I think one of the things as you go up to these other levels, they're asking, okay, are you going to be around in 3 years? I think that was one of the points you brought to me when this discussion first started. So I think us in making a commitment for the 3 years is going to send a message out to a broader community in terms of, yes, you guys are here to stay. Yeah, you have a new name, but we have a new focus and a new sense of purpose. So I think that I'm just trying to remember that goes back a little ways too. So, you know, the old memory wasn't once was, but I think that was why we talked about the 3-year thing once upon a time. And I think that makes some sense. If you're a grant offering entity, you want to make sure that the money, like our business grants, the business is going to be around in 3 years at least or whatever. And there's a lot more zeros after their grants than ours, so.
Nicole is our financial director. Any concerns on your end?
Well, I would just caution the board that, and I apologize, I don't have updated numbers in front of me, but the last time I did estimates with the loan programs and the grant program as they stand right now, it's another 7 years before those loan programs are self-funding.
Yeah.
It's 2 to 3 years before the EDA is out of money for all of these programs.
It's also unusual to make a commitment of this length when we are going to be having such a lot of board turnover, and that the last $50,000 was given in March of this year, so we would be also moving that cycle back as well. My comments are that I understand, and I think that there are very great things being done. But to put a lot of the eggs in the grant basket when I haven't really seen a plan of how you're going to sustain your rent, your salaries, the salary of the assistant, the incubators. There's a lot of stuff, and we're happy to support, and I'm happy to support. But I think 3 years is not something that we normally do. And it's something that you should be coming back with year after year so that we can see the progress. And where we're at.
You're not asking for the money without conditions, right?
No.
So we could set conditions as a predicate to any future requests.
Sure.
Yes.
So could we direct staff to come up with some of those conditions and then, which,
Yeah, and Chris, you sit on the partnership board. I would think that they're going to have their finger on that pulse better, because I'm assuming many of these things have been discussed in your meeting on a regular basis. Obviously, Newbrook has to be around as an entity for us to make contributions in the future. I mean, that would be item number one. But I think we could create benchmarks pertaining to certain milestones that are reached along the way that would condition us to say, yeah, we're ready to go forward with another. And that's what I think you're giving us a game plan. This is what we're looking at right now. Some of this, I don't know, is some of this within a 3-year window, or does it go beyond that? In terms of the bus, the incubator.
EDA grant we should hear next week,
Okay,
and that runs for an 18-month period.
okay.
Business Incubator Accelerator Program, that's not going to happen in, a few months.
No. And,
but-
and when you speak of the other communities, Hutch, Albert Lee, Red Wing, how long have their incubators been in existence?
2002, 2008.
So some of them over 10 years,
And
or,
some are getting, like Albert Lee, there was a thing in the Minnesota State Legislature 20 years ago that allowed Albert Lee to establish a port authority. And then the port authority owns a bunch of properties, and it throws off about $1 million a year to their EDA, or to these guys, which is not the EDA, but it's another group. It's called Grow Albert Lee. But they get $1 million a year.
that's a private group, the Grow Albert Lee?
It's kind
Okay,
of like Newbrick.
okay,
And Red Wing Ignites the same way.
okay. So they find mechanisms to continue funding for the private
Right.
corporate. Okay,
And with us only having one lot left, you know, we're going to be out of the investment real estate game. So we have to look at other avenues to generate revenue.
And then to your point, Dan, I mean, it would just be like if we had a consultant come in, they get to tell us what their goals and they get to set their timeline of what they feel they can accomplish in the year. That's not on Heather or myself or even the partnership to decide that. It's what Newburgh feels they can accomplish, is what they feel they can do within that year, and turn that in so we can put that as their scope of work for
Right.
the contract.
And
And we can
I-
work with Shannon and Paul to figure out
right.
what
And I
those
think
goals are.
it comes down, and I think there's accountability. I think it's just the timetable in which we want to establish that window of accountability.
Yeah, because I mean, technically, their contract is through March, so we still have 2 or 3 months to figure out what that scope of work is going to be and what they feel they can accomplish
Okay.
in a year. So we can work with them.
I would also like to see a little bit more information regarding to independence and sustainability as well. Again, there's some great things going on here, and there's a lot of grants, but these grants are going towards these specific projects. The business incubators, even as you mentioned, may or may not generate very much for revenue. So as far as, revenue generating activity, this is not something that I want to be continuing to fund year over year over year if you're looking to be more independent.
From talking to Red Wing when we were there and so forth, once they get those programs off the ground and they're getting these grants, a portion of that is built in for funding their staff. So,
And that's great. And what is our plan for that? What is Newburgh's plan for that?
right, that's why last week we spent many days touring a lot of these to try and get ideas. And we're sitting down with Chris and Heather later today to talk about that, because that in every one of those communities, there was some sort of collaboration between their economic development corp, their EDA, their city, and the only way we're going to get that done and in a decent amount of time is if we all work together. And so our funding request is just to help us get through that research period, and there's a lot to think of. And so we have been spending a lot of time. We've had a lot of good conversations with people in town. So we're just asking for your help so that we can continue to do these things. I guess more question about sustainability. I'm not really sure what you're looking for right now. We can certainly provide you with our expenses if that's what you are.
It's more of a plan of how you plan to support the salaries and the growth and some of these things that may not be covered by grants, if that makes sense. Part of the administrative fees are in that, yes.
Right. And I
from
think the discussion today is that Newburgh is a relatively new entity and organization. That's number one. So they're the new kid on the block. It's not like these entities in other communities that have been around. I imagine when a grant application is received, they're going to be very familiar with that name, for Albert Lee Hutchinson or what have you. They're not going to know what's Newburgh. And so I think for us, in terms of collaboration, is we have to understand that piece of it, number one. Number two, saying that sustainability is something that does not happen overnight, and that we have to look at it. If we're committed to this, it's going to be a long game. And that's where I think you're coming from today, is saying we need 3 years. We need a 3-year commitment in order for this to continue on. Like, if we like what we see today, and we want to see the chances of that succeeding, there's no guarantees. We have to rely on others to say yes or no with grant applications. We found out ourselves with the not being granted the deed application for the daycare, that doesn't always happen. So I'm interested in knowing, okay, if we're not successful, do we have a plan B? with Newbrick in terms of some of these grants that you've applied for? Are there other sources that we can go or is it back to the drawing board and then we develop a new plan? Is it because we don't have an incubator and it's been so successful in other communities, does that lead to the chances of being successful with these grants to be more likely to be given?
I think so, and I think because we're in a rural community and there's nothing to the west of us to offering that, you know, from speaking to some of these other communities, especially Hutchinson, you know, they were like, every rural community should have something like this. And he's got 3 businesses now that have been in there. I mean, and it's just, they know they have to be out in a certain amount of time, right? So they have to figure it out. And now they've got 3 that are graduating to that next step and buying lots and, you know, in Hutch and going to do things. So it was really exciting to see what that could be. And after talking to, you know, only one person down at the CT, you know, from talking to Jeff, that there are kids that are graduating and have ideas and want to see if this will work. And that's what's perfect for the incubator to see. So we're so early in some of that research. I think we've got a lot of, I mean, it was very informative, I thought. Heather, you were there too. It's exciting to see what could be done, but we need some time. You know, we made a large donation to the CT Center. So our funds are a little limited. We have had some lot sales and we've invested that money and hoping. So, you know, if we didn't have your money, you know, our burn rate, you know, we were trying to figure that out, you know, maybe that 2 to 3 years and we'd be out.
Okay.
We have 1 lot left. You know, I kind of want to hang on to it just to see from talking to, you know, the city and stuff, if that can be used or 1031 exchange for something else. So there's just a lot of conversations that need to be had yet, but we're all putting in the time and we're trying to move that needle as fast as we can.
Mr. President, I'm keep looking at the clock and knowing we still have a work session to get through. So I'd like to propose something that I think might help move this forward. One, I heard Paul mention that he'd like to see somebody from our board join. Unfortunately, I think I'd like to wait till our next meeting when we have our new board and see if there's somebody that has a real expressed interest, or maybe it's somebody with more people at time on this board, but I think we need to have that discussion next month. But then I'm thinking, I hear you guys wanting to get going. You want to get going. And I hear you wanting this for an assistant or some help. So what if we move this along by offering a motion to approve the first year at $50,000 and get you going, and then work on plan for 24 and 25 in the next few months and talk about these markers, talk about what we're all looking for. But that gets you a step forward and get you going, and then get what we want, which is a little bit more of that detail, devil's in the details information, and work that out the next couple of months. How does that sound to folks?
Well, certainly the money's up until March, so we could have you come back before that deadline, even though we would today fund 23 through March of 24.
Is that how you consider it, March?
Well, that's when the money ran out, I
It
thought.
does. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm kind of,
Yeah,
if you could approve at least 1 year, it would make me feel a whole lot comfortable because we are having an admin person start. We do need
Right,
to
exactly.
outfit another office down at the CT Center. It would just give us some breathing room this
Yeah,
next year while we're
exactly.
trying to figure some
Yep.
things out.
I'm going to go ahead and offer that. So 2 motions. One motion is to put on the agenda for next month a representative of our committee to join Newbrick as an unofficial, non-voting member. Yeah. And then secondly, $50,000. I'm going to just put it for calendar year, not March to March. I think that's going to be just odd for us to keep remembering all that. For January 2024, 23, excuse me. I haven't had much coffee yet. I forgot my coffee. And then also to have staff work with Newbrick in putting together a plan for 24 and 25 in the next couple months.
and Paul, I think we would have heard on that first grant
Yeah, we'll
maybe
know more
by
info.
early in, yeah,
We have a start date Jan 1.
okay. But we would have some more questions answered at that point, though, in '23 for maybe addressing going forward is what I'm saying. So, yeah. Okay.
So we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second. Any additional discussion? Hearing no, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That is carried.
Thank you.
Okay, we are to rental properties. Approved lease for EDA and property.
So we received a request from Ted Bergstrom with B Concessions. He has been renting the EDA lot at 326 North Broadway for several years for his food truck. He likes the location, and for his future planning, he would like to know if he can lease that spot again for the periods of May 1st through October 31st, 2023, and May 1st through October 31st, 2024, for the same conditions that he's had, rental fee of $150 a month that includes utilities. Staff has had no issues with the food truck rentals. We've had 3 food trucks renting it. They work together on scheduling. The only item Mr. Bergstrom requests is that no similar menu items would be duplicated by other vendors, and that has not been a problem. Typically, we've approved these on a year-by-year basis, and we certainly could continue to do that. He's requesting a 2-year agreement, but that, of course, is up to you.
So he's completed 3 years. This would be year 4 and 5. We've not raised his price at all, but electricity's been going up and other costs have been going up, and it's a pretty good deal. I've never really liked the fact that he can tell the other 2, you can't make what we make. I'm sure they don't want to, but it's like if one makes French fries, the other one can't make French fries. Come on. I don't know if I go along with that, but I think there should be an increase.
I agree too, and I'm not comfortable with a 2-year commitment. I mean, we just did a 1-year, and look at the discussion we had on that. We don't know what utility prices are going to be doing, but we know that they're going to be increasing. I mean, I appreciate his foresight in wanting to get
Sure.
2 years for that, but I also agree with Les that, I think that it should be up to the city, that the vendor shouldn't be able to choose, what other foods other competitors can sell.
The only way I would do a 2-year is if he would agree to pay utilities, and we make a flat rent, and then he
Not that we
pays
had a problem with
utilities.
that we couldn't figure that out, right?
Oh, because it's
Is that what I
split
remember?
between the tenants. Sure, that makes
Right,
sense.
yeah. There aren't separate meters, so if we have multiple
We don't wanna go down
food
that
trucks.
road.
But I can tell you, we used to rent this for, when we just had one food truck, the rent was $100 and they paid their own utilities. We increased it to $150 because we are now paying the utilities, and the increase from $100 to $150, and we're collecting that on 3 trucks, so we're collecting an additional $150 a month. The monthly electric bill is nowhere close to that, so we are more than covering our utility costs with that increased rent.
Are we allowed to charge a rental fee for the renting of the space, or are we only allowed to charge for what we feel the utilities are? Is that, I don't know if that's a Nicole question, maybe, or,
This is for renting the space.
yeah.
House
We
next-
own the land. It doesn't cost us anything. The land, there's no cost to us for the land. It's paid for. So the money we're collecting is bringing in rental revenue as well as more than covering our utility costs for the 3 trucks.
And the
And-
citizens love it. I mean, they do. I mean, it's a neat thing to have in our community.
I agree. I think it's been positive, and like I say, we've started with 1 and now we're up to 3. We have
don't know
room
if the
for
other 2 are going
4.
to come back yet. They haven't requested to come back as of now.
The other 2 have not yet. But I mean,
But
it's,
they
he's
pay $150
really
as
ahead
well?
of the game here.
They pay $150 as well, correct?
Yes, they all
Yeah.
paid the same, yeah.
It's $150 a month is probably what he's turning in profit in a day, so.
So we've been bringing in $450 a month with the 3 food trucks, which is virtually all rental revenue with, the minor utility bill that we get each month. It's all unbudgeted revenue that,
Right.
it's gravy.
I think it's fine. I don't,
And 150 you're okay with, looking ahead to what might be happening in the spring and fall with utility, like 150 is good? You're good with it?
I'd like to see it go
I
up.
am, but it's,
I would
You know,
like
it's
to
up to
see
you.
it go up a little bit as well.
I just don't want the rent to get too high that
Yeah.
then they can't afford to run their food truck, because I can't imagine they're making, that much money, but.
I see this as a community benefit thing where I think it enhances people. I mean, when there's ball games down
I
at
mean, I agree
Johnson
our
and-
utility costs may go up, but their food costs certainly have gone up as well. So,
This isn't a moneymaker for us, and we're covering our
do you think?
expenses.
Leave it alone. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I like it, Terry.
You know, I would agree with that too. Let's just leave that.
All right, I'll
But
offer a
if-
motion as stated.
For 2 years.
I would offer a motion, oh, sorry. You already did your motion. I'll wait.
Do we want to amend the motion?
Oh, and I'm going to amend it to 1 year, though.
Okay.
I think there's 3 new board members coming, they might have a different take on it.
And again, we can reassess a year from now.
Let's do it a
Have
year.
utilities gone through the roof or anything?
yeah, I have to say I agree with sticking to the 1 year, just because the future's unknown, and if we start getting into these long-term agreements,
Well, my
know.
concern is what if the other 2 don't come back and we're down to 1 vendor, and then what does that mean with our utility costs? Because we were dependent upon the 3 vendors.
We'll be
And,
fine.
be
be
making
fine.
money,
well, I know.
it's.
Motion and a second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Do we want to have anything in there that states about the competition of foods? I mean, it's just something that we brought up. It doesn't mean we have to put something in, but
I
we
think
were
they
discussing
kind of
it.
work among themselves, and everybody seems, like you'd said, they work together on scheduling
Talk to 'em,
and
Heather?
menus and.
The food truck vendors? Yeah, I talked to
So you
them
could
all.
probably tell them that the board wasn't really excited about saying, you can't have french fries, only I can.
And I don't think it carries to French fries. I think it's
I
like
think
if
it's
I
more the
serve
main-
turkey legs, you're not serving turkey
Right.
legs too. Like French fries
Yeah,
is a common
well,
thing,
okay.
but they're different.
I'm okay leaving it as is, but I guess if there is any disputes or issues, that's something we should look at for next year.
Okay. Anything else? Otherwise, let's call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Lots of discussion about food trucks. Okay. Which leads us to 7.1, discussion of EDA goals for 2023. Just let me preface this by saying no discussion about food trucks for 2023 goals, okay?
Please.
Deal. Yeah, so this is an item Commissioner Schultz had requested we add to the agenda due to the mayor term ending, and as well as 2 of our long-term commissioners leaving. I guess we want to pick their brain and get final thoughts before they're.
Well, I
Off
think,
to
Les,
new
you've already
endeavors.
brought up a couple great items. I think getting somebody involved from the EDA into Newbrick is a great step for a 2023 goal. And that'll.
Didn't you at one time go to
Yeah, but
those meetings,
see,
and why
I
did
was
that
never
stop?
ex officio, and then they wanted me to vote on that
that other
board, and I
group.
couldn't vote on this board, and it got all
Oh, you were a
muddled.
voting member.
Yes,
Oh,
and so
I
I
see.
think you go to the meetings. I would love, and honestly, if you look at our charter, they're supposed to have an ex officio member on our board. So I don't know why we're
In
going
the
the other
past, that
way.
was Brian Hohol, and that was my question. Why are we going to their meetings to get transparency? If we're funding them, shouldn't they be coming to our meetings and reporting to us?
Well, that was
They used
kind
to,
of
Brian
the
did.
thought, but some discussions
I mean, if
in the
we want to know
private-
what they have going on, shouldn't they be coming and telling you if you're funding
Part of
them?
working out those little details.
They don't have cameras and microphones at their meetings. Maybe I can just say that. Maybe some of the discussions can be a little more frank. I don't know. Having been there for a while, I can say that maybe, but I don't know. I think it's a good step, no matter which way the road goes, that there's participation for both entities, so we kind of get a little better, and I agree. I think it's going to add to our transparency and enhance our communication.
Yeah. I guess I would argue that, if we're using public money to fund them, the public has a right to know what they're working on. And this is a public meeting. And they don't have to get into details of
Right.
stating the
that's-
company name, they can still let us know how many unique business visits they've had in the prior month and,
Could be an
you know,
agenda item.
it is an
It
agenda
had
item.
been.
Yeah, it has.
It is an
Had been.
agenda item,
Yep.
but we don't get a monthly report.
And I think
And I
that's
think we
where,
should.
if we try this from the other angle, maybe it becomes better. I don't know.
Well, and that's part of the reason that I was more in favor of a single year of renewal, because I really felt like a better job could have been done with communications and, understanding and, what are their goals. I mean, I understand, where they're coming from, but to be reliant on receiving $500,000 in grant funding over the next 2 years to, sustain, like, that's kind of an uphill climb. And so
Yeah.
that's where I wasn't
And the
comfortable
purpose of
committing.
the partnership meetings is to have those private conversations, and I don't feel we've been kept up to speed there either.
Well, that was my question and point too. Are we duplicating things if there's representation at the partnership and anything that's supposed to be going on, anything relevant to economic development is supposed to be discussed within the walls of the partnership meetings? And if that's not happening, and that should get reported back to the EDA as well, we're all supposed to be in the know. Our thing is we're a public entity. We're funded through taxpayer money. We have to be here and do what we do. And so I think that's why the buck stops here, and that's why if any entity comes for money requests, we've got to have it all spelled out.
And I think that's just part of I would say the miscommunication between Newbrick and EDA is they're receiving taxpayer dollars, and those taxpayer dollars have strings attached to it.
Accountability.
And so, what that looks like is, we can't say because of, non-disclosure and stuff like that. It's like,
Yes.
like Heather said, it's like, I don't need the business name. I just need to know you talk to a business that's looking at a building, and here are the 2 services we provided them. Right. Like, I'm not asking for specific names and things like that. And I think those are those learning curves, because again, Paul, is new and he doesn't know those things. And, when he's talking about the grants, it is cumbersome. But, I think between Heather, myself, even Andrew, we've applied for those federal grants. We know, but they've never reached out to us to ask how to go through those motions. And yes, Region 9 is a very good source, and they will help them. But even Region 9 didn't even reach out to us asking us for letters of support or anything like that. So again, it's a two-way street where they want us to be, have their back, but when they apply for stuff, they don't even come and ask us unless it's at an EDA meeting at the 11th hour saying, hey, we need help or support or money and things like that. So it's the growing pains that we're going through as they're kind of revamping and doing everything. And I'm 100% spot on with, yes, let's give them a year and see what those next parameters, those next things are so we have that good relationship.
So why I put this on the agenda, just to kind of refocus this discussion, was, when I joined the city council, I got put on this group, and so I've been on here since '09, a long time. And we did housing, and we did Milford, and of course we did terrible at that, we all know that. We got out of the housing business, and then we got smart, and I said, let's invest in incentives for businesses to come to our community, some loans and things like that, and we did a really nice job of that. And then a couple of years ago, we said, let's switch focus a little bit, and let's go to daycare, where daycare is a huge issue in our community, and we need some help with that. So we've been focusing a lot on that. My intent for this topic item is, the 3 of you that have been sitting on here for a while, what's the next mountain to climb that we should be starting to look at? Because I think we're getting there with the daycare. That potentially could be done in a year and a half or so. Then where do we go? So that's why I wanted this on the agenda. You 3 have that experience and background, and so that's where I want with this agenda item.
Well, I wrote a few things down.
Okay.
Number 1, and these are no order of importance, so don't take one being more important than the other. But the first thing I wrote down was make a determination and set objectives relative to the retention or disposition of Garden Terrace. We recently got the appraisal, $7 million. Would that $7 million work in reallocation? I would never suggest we spend it all at once. That's not what I'm saying at all. But just shifting that into another form of assets, would that be a plausible alternative to us holding real estate? And what would that look like? What would we see as potential returns? What we use to fund? In a sense, maybe create a capital account and from that go on with ongoing funding sources. And maybe that would help Nicole and try to keep our book solvent into the future and until such time as our revolving loan funds are self-sustaining. But that's kind of item number one. Item number two is just with the recent publication of our latest housing study, I think we have to kind of put that back in the forefront. Last time that was in the forefront was like my first year back in 17 and Emerson Union came to fruition. And I think that came through the efforts of a lot of people in the community. And I think we have to refocus our efforts again. I mean, recently there's been a lot of discussion about what long-term care looks like for our community and the issues facing those facilities. I don't think it's incumbent on us to face that as a direct issue, but I think indirectly, when it comes to housing, I think we have to look at our population. And I think the two things that glared out at me would be senior type housing with some sort of limited services and then some independent type housing facilities that offer a wide array of price points. And I think we want to look at two things. Cooperatives, I think, are very cost effective as a means of giving seniors a viable ownership alternative, and then rental properties with limited services. So I would recommend that we look at those two types of housing, number one and number two, when we start to address what our current housing needs are. The other things addressed in there, and I think I read in the report, there's only 2 lots left in Milford. So Les, that's in the rearview mirror, man. So a single-family housing.
We got there.
Well, I think they identified there seems to be for the foreseeable future adequate number of single-family lots. So I don't think we need to necessarily make that a priority item, but I don't think that we want to shy away from the possibility of looking at some incentivization for development, both in multifamily and single-family. So if we can play a role in somehow making that happen. One of the thoughts I had in the past is if we create a revolving loan fund for infrastructure, that we could do that and finance that and then recapture money when lots are sold. If that would facilitate the quicker turnaround of new construction rather than relying on the bonding of the city where that gets to be a little more on their time schedule. If right now with the cost of housing, single family is so prohibitively cost, we really have to wait for things to kind of stabilize there. So I don't think that that's a big priority item. So the last thing I had was just better define roles. And I think we've already talked about that a lot today in communication and who's doing what. I would love to see detailed information come back from the partnership. I see the partnership as the overall governing entity for anything economic development within the community, because that's where everybody comes to the same table and discusses wants, needs, priorities and objectives. And then we obviously play an important role. I see the EDA as being probably, again, I've said this many times, we're the ones with the checkbook. But they come to us, it's got to be viable, it's got to be understandable, and it's got to be precise. And I don't think we're quite there yet today. And I think what we did today was the absolute right move. 1 year, let's get you guys to get a little better formalized, and then let's take another look at things. So that's all I had, Les. Did you have?
That's it?
Yeah,
Nothing?
sorry. Come up for
wrap that up
oxygen
in a
now.
I would agree with any of those points. when I started on this board 6 years ago, I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So daycare was probably my own personal top mind issue. And so I'm really happy with the work that so many have put into that. I wouldn't let our foot off the gas necessarily with that, though. It's not like, hey, we solved it with this, you know.
That's a good point.
So I would still keep that as an ongoing, thing to, look at, be aware that there's going to be an ongoing need, and not just, within our city limits. I know, especially in rural areas, family members and things, it's hard. So that's still something I think to keep in mind, in workforce housing and Garden Terrace. Yeah, those are all good goals. I'd also say for your new board members, I really had no idea what I was getting into on this board. So maybe a little orientation session if your new members aren't sure, just to kind of, welcome them and keep those meetings to an hour.
Crying all morning.
Les, you're the keeper, you're the timekeeper, and you do a great job. So I
I'd have
know
been
that'll
long gone if I
continue
was
to
still
happen.
working.
And I have to say, just I extremely proud that I've been involved with this, and this was my second round of being on the EDA. Night and day difference. I think we have an engaged staff and board, and we've done some things, and we're going to continue to do some things. I know that I am leaving it in more than capable hands, so I feel really good about that you guys are going to do an excellent job, and I can't wait to read your write-ups in the journal each month and see what did they do now, so I'm really happy to think that's
Always watch us on YouTube.
that's true. My grandson finally taught me how to go on YouTube and look at videos, so there we go.
Well, my compliments to both of you. You both have brought unique perspectives, and Dan, you jumped right on board because you've been here before. And Jessica, just having your freshness and ideas of things as well. So thank you, from my perspective, from your time on this board, the 6 years you've spent. So thank you. Mayor,
An orientation is a good idea.
I like that too. Heather, that's on you. Right now.
Have done that. I must have missed you, Jessica. I have done that before with new commissioners where.
Well, the
toured
problem
them
is you want them
around
to come back.
Yeah, you toured me around. Yeah, you drove me around.
What was that?
You want them to come back after the orientation, right? So
Right.
In a year.
Yeah, I don't want to overwhelm them, but yeah, I try and show them the properties and.
No, yeah, it's been.
That was helpful.
Mhm.
And Mayor?
Daycare, like Jess, my life has changed. My kids have found daycare for their kids. But we just talked last night. They're still on a waiting list. They have a provider. They're not super happy with her, but she does a decent job. But the ideal one she's after, she's still on a waiting list for like 3 years already.
Wow.
Yeah, and she's on waiting list with 2 other places. So it's not solved.
You're right, it's not solved yet.
Not even close.
I would very much support that for whoever is going to be the new, how many new members we got?
3.
Who's leaving? You are?
These two?
Dan,
And the mayor.
Jessica, and then Mark Peterson resigned, so
yeah.
we're,
Okay, all
we
right,
have his open seat.
we'll have a
And
new
then we'll have a
mayor.
new mayor.
'Cause, I'm
So it'll be a new look in January.
Well, you and
up
I
here.
are
The old timers.
right?
Yes.
Anymore.
Not
Well,
anymore.
No, not anymore.
You'll be the
So-
old pros.
No, but I will tell you this, that, they're, when I got asked to be on this, it's just sort of my nature. In fact, I irritate people occasionally by asking a lot of questions. And Heather, you can, I spent a lot of time asking you questions, and you were very generous of that, your time, and it was helpful. But, not everybody does that, asks a lot of questions. And so I think maybe a little bit more of a formal orientation program is a really good idea.
Well, and I think that that needs to take place during those conversations prior to, assuming who's going to be serving. And so I did have conversations with Michelle and with Shar, encouraged them to attend and, watch meetings and really kind of dug into, what that EDA is. So I think that, as the mayor who kind of helps to find folks for these commissions, and then us as members that are serving on those, looking for people that we think would be a good fit, I think that also really does start with us too, so that they understand, what does the EDA do, and that it's something that you're drinking from a fire hose at first, but you get it, and you come along for the ride. You learn so much, and you feel like you're really making a difference in the community. But again, just letting people know what those expectations are before they're coming in the door is really helpful as well, and gives them a little bit of confidence when you come in. Because I know, I don't know if anyone else feels the same way, but the first couple of meetings for me were, whoa.
Yep.
And so anything that we can do to help show them that, we support them, and that you might not know it today, but you're gonna pick up real quick.
So Commissioner Berg, I don't know if you know this, but now that you have a year under your belt, you're in charge of leading the new commissioner orientation because you're a pro now.
That's typically.
Ms. Black will help you.
Talk too much and get in trouble, but yeah, I'll do it.
I'm also wondering, I'm looking at our time, and I look at the housing study coming up for the work session. I'm wondering, it really makes more sense to have all of us here for that, the new people. Because if we're going over it now, there's 4 people that are not going to hear what we hear.
Yeah.
And we might be making decisions based off of that housing study. So I would have a recommendation that we table that housing study to January. Is that okay?
Let's shoot for February, give them a chance to read it, get acclimated, and then shoot for the February one if that
Yeah,
works.
I'm okay with that, yeah. Yeah, that first session, with new people, is going to be overwhelming for them anyway.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I would agree.
okay. Do we have anything else on that agenda?
Just the economic development report.
Your stuff, or whoever's stuff.
Economic Development Report activities.
I will keep it short. You can see the partnership recap. We spent time reviewing concepts, ideas, and possibilities from the comprehensive plan, rapid planning sessions, reviewed the partnership's economic development priorities, and as well as spent some time reviewing the recommendations from the housing study.
So Heather, those priorities, how do they match up to what Newbrook was saying today? Is there any
Chris,
alignment?
So what we were doing with the priorities is our first initial priorities were kind of to form the partnership and kind of how to get us going in the right direction. So this set of priorities is taking 3, whether it's business retention, attraction, housing, daycare, kind of general
Gotcha.
topics, and then what Newbrook is doing for each one, so that we aren't doing the same thing, or we can at least partnership with that. And so that's kind of where we are with those goals. So they're very broad categories, and then what we're specifically doing under each one per organization, so we can mesh those together.
So
Yeah, that's a work in progress. So we reviewed where we started. We are working on developing
going.
goals for where we're
So-
going.
I think just going forward, this is a recommendation of a soon-to-be ex-commissioner, but would it make sense for us to bring our ideas and objectives to the partnership so we also are coordinating? Like housing, for instance, we're gonna hopefully take a dive into housing this next year. So what EDA plans to do would be brought to the partnership, and
Yes.
then the back and forth. So it's kind of like we're finally at that stage. It took us almost a year to get there or whatever. Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I
There
didn't mean
have
to interrupt, and
Been
we're already
growing
long.
pains, and we're starting to figure that out. So
Perfect.
Yep, we're still working on that. Moving on to the daycare team, as I noted earlier, we did not receive the grant this round. If it opens up for applications again, I will continue to apply for it until we do get it. So, because we will. Might take 3, 4, 5 applications, but you know how DEED is. We just have to keep putting our name in the hat. Like I said, we'll be closing on the purchase on Monday. We are meeting with the architect Friday, hopefully to finalize the design so we can move into the construction bidding phase. Fundraising efforts continue. I continue to search for new grant opportunities and apply for those. We held our child care provider training event weekend, and that had strong attendance, and we've received very positive feedback. Providers are wanting us to offer that again in the future. And I did find out that there are SMIF grants available to pay for it. So the EDA gave me a $4,000 budget for this event. In the future, I intend to apply for grants so that we don't have to fund that out of our money. Small business loan, one application was received in November in the amount of $10,000. Small Business Incentive Grant Program, 2 grant applications were awarded in November. And then under other, Wendy Anderson's quarterly report is attached for your review. She was not able to be here today due to a schedule conflict on her end. Scan through here. I did want to mention that the billboard campaign that we had talked about a while back, and you had approved paying for the production costs in the first 4 weeks of the billboard, I was able to secure 7 employer sponsors. So the billboards will be up for 32 weeks. They go up January 9th, and they'll be up through August, middle of August. So due to, there was a slight rate increase for 2023, and also because of the length of the campaign, the production costs went up a little bit because they'll switch out the vinyl halfway through because the vinyl won't last that long. There's wear and tear and whatnot. So the total EDA cost will be about $1,700, which is about $500 than was approved. I hope that's okay. I've already signed the contract, so it's going to have to be. But the good news, it was very successful, and they will be up, and hopefully that will help our employers fill some of their job openings. So now we're educating the employers to get their jobs posted on the Chamber's job board, because that's where the billboard is going to drive job seekers to. Yeah, I guess that's up.
And then one thing that I would like to just add is Andrew and I went to Germany as a clean energy delegation, and looking at just what Minnesota is doing and what companies are looking at. One thing that we as the EDA need to start kind of just looking at it as a group as a whole is renewable energy sources. And when we look at companies, what are we doing to help them? Because Minnesota is looking to be carbon neutral by 2040 to 2050. So we need to start making strides towards that. And how do we do it? So again, we can have that discussion in January, but just wanted to kind of put it out there because a lot of the places that we visited were getting companies purely on the fact that this city was completely green, and they were getting large employers to come in and do stuff because of that. So just on the horizon. So I'll leave it at that. We can have a further discussion in January.
And I would agree, and I don't know how much of a role it is of the EDA or the Chamber or some of these other companies, but to maybe start talking with some of our larger employers on what their energy goals are, to make sure that we're on board and that we can help them with those, because we want to retain them here. I would hate to lose a company, in town because we can't provide them what we need. And then having access to our own utilities that we own is a very, it's a good plus, for what we've seen over there. But I think it's, we really need to start having those conversations with these businesses because they want to do it. They have most of them, they do have goals of their own. And what Chris said.
Be beneficial to get some sort of an outside needs assessment for the community with the major employers. And then I would see, and maybe I don't know enough about it, but if we coordinate those efforts for renewable resources and energy, and we could make programs that would be specific for our community, would that be a starting point for the EDA to fund something like that? And then we could take those to the employers and say, hey, this is a piece of information we've gathered. This is how we see a role going forward for this to happen.
Yeah, and that would be in partnership with the PUC. I mean, we made a lot of good connections with our local delegation that went, but with the German counterparts as well. So we have some work ahead of us, but I think we've kind of, at least I know what the end goal should be and what we should strive to, and it's reverse engineering with firms that are here to help us get to lay that plan out. But again, we can talk about that at another point in time.
All right. Is there anything else?
I'll make a motion to accept the Economic Development Activity Report for November 22 activities.
I'll second.
Discussion. Hearing no, we'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. And I'm going to bang the gavel for the last
This
time.
meeting ever is adjourned. Mayor, thank you for your leadership.
Yes. Mary, what are you going to do in retirement?
The Price is Right starts at 10 o'clock.